So in today's video, I want to talk about using your time efficiently while we have free access to seasons and DLCs right now. If you didn't know, Bungie is temporarily giving people free access to Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Shadowkeep. And in addition to that, all of the current seasons for this year, which is seasons 20, 21, 22, and 23. So this video is for those players who don't have access to any or all of that content, and are looking to figure out what the most efficient use of their time is for getting weapons that they won't be able to get again in the future. So I originally recorded this basically saying not to go after stasis fragments and stuff because it wouldn't be available to you after they got rid of the DLCs, but Bungie released a TWAB just today saying that we would get to keep stasis afterwards, so you should actually go for it if that is something you're interested in. However, I will maintain my sentiment that it's not very good when it comes to PvE on any of the classes. It's got some use cases on like Hunter and Titan of course, but Warlock is not really that helpful, and in the future Prismatic is just going to take over everything it does anyway. So I'll leave that up to your discretion. If you do want stasis, you'll at least be able to keep it, so do what you want with that. Normally though, when it comes to something like Strand with temporary access to Beyond Light, you wouldn't get to keep it, as I learned with my alternate account John LFG. So as with anything time management, you first want to look at how much time you actually have. This event of free DLC is going to go on until June 3rd, which I believe is the week of or the week before the final shape drops. I might be totally wrong on that, but it is pretty much near the end of this season currently, so you have quite a bit of time. The first thing you should do is get as many exotic ciphers as you can from all the sources you can. If you don't already, start doing these Xur quests every weekend until the season ends. And make sure you check the Season Pass because those do have exotic ciphers in them. I personally own the Season Pass, so I don't actually know whether or not you get access to the bonus loot for the paid track. But if you do, then definitely check that and see if you can get any extra rewards from that. I'd also appreciate if you guys let me know in the comments if you are able to access this paid track on the Season Pass or not. However, you do have access to these seasonal activities for sure, and these have been updated to add guaranteed red border weapons for a run of each one from each season for every single day. Basically, the first one of a day is going to have a guaranteed red border drop. And honestly, the seasonal weapons is where I think most of the good loot is going to come from this free expansion. Otherwise, you don't really get access to a ton of unreplaceable gear. Unfortunately, most of the good gear that's locked behind DLC is still locked behind Forsaken, which to my knowledge is not available in this. However, if Forsaken is available, the big selling points are basically Izanagi's Burden, Apex, and Supremacy. But moving on from that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the best seasonal weapons we've had this year and explain why they are super good currently. Kicking it off with Season 20, we basically have one weapon in the entry, and that is the Imperial Decree. I've talked about this weapon a few times on the channel. It's still a really great weapon in my eyes. It gets access to Trench Barrel mixed with Threat Detector. This is a great combo for Major Clear because you can basically proc Trench Barrel very easily and quickly, and then you get a shot that is able to one-shot a lot of things in the game. It's also decent for some sustained damage if you're using like Tractor Cannon or another support weapon and you want to keep up good damage with your specials. It's a very lazy option, and it's still better than using something like a fusion rifle. This might not drop from the seasonal activity guaranteed red borders because it was added as a special type of engram on the board at the helm. So if you are going to go for this, make sure you're saving your Season of Defiance engrams to turn in at the table to get the Leviathan engrams. In Season 21, we basically had one major PvE weapon, and that is the Until Its Return. This is another shotgun, and it's a little bit unfortunate that it is Strand because it could be doing even more damage, but it has some of the best DPS weapon perks in the game for shotguns right now. Currently, you've got the choice between either Autoloading Holster or Overflow for reload perks, and the choice between either Vorpal, Surrounded, or Cascade Point for damage perks. My personal favorite is Autoloading Holster with Cascade Point. It's great to basically just proc Cascade Point with another weapon, put it on, dump the mag, go back to your other weapons, shoot those for a while it reloads, and repeat the process. Moving on to Season 22, we actually have two weapons, and this is the Semiotician to start things off. It's a Strand rocket launcher, and it is a high impact frame launcher. These launchers used to be really bad because they basically had no merits over like an adaptive or an aggressive frame launcher. However, that has since changed in a recent update where they added 2 additional rounds to all high impact frame rockets and moved more of the damage profile into the explosion damage, which made it very effective in general content like GMs where you're not always able to hit a direct shot easily. On top of all this, it has access to enhanced field prep, and to my knowledge it's the only high impact frame rocket with enhanced field prep available to it, and this lets it have a staggering 11 rockets without any mods on. And if you add bipod, this will go up to 16 rockets, again without any reserve mods. This is a great rocket for something like general content, just going through hard stuff, especially Grandmaster Strikes, while using the Cenotaph helmet to generate ammo for it. However, there's still better options when it comes to something like raid DPS. We also have the Eremite Solar Fusion Rifle available. It's a high impact frame, and these are not the best frame when you compare them to something like Rapids, however they are definitely the second best frame. If you have access to the Cartesian coordinate, which is technically free to play, but it's heavily FOMO'd and hard to get, then I would definitely just keep using Cartesian and pass on this. However, if you're really needing a Solar Fusion Rifle, the Eremite is a decent one. It gets access to Envious Assassin mixed with Controlled Burst, which is a decent choice if you're running Tractor to do some really lazy, easy damage. And into the current season, Season 23, we actually have the most powerful weapons I've seen from Seasons in quite a while. The first one we'll look at is going to be the Appetence. This one disappointed a lot of people when it first released because we really wanted a kinetic trace rifle with shoot to loot. It was such a big deal because shoot to loot's such a good perk on trace rifles. However, it still has some pretty decent perks, and it is still one of the only kinetic slot trace rifles in the game right now. If you are going to go after this one, I would recommend going for Demolitionist mixed with Killing Tally. Reloads with your grenades will not actually reset the counter on Killing Tally, so as long as you're able to get 10 kills within a magazine, then you are good to go, and you will have the Killing Tally damage buff up as long as you have the weapon equipped. And Cenotaph will also gradually reload it very quickly actually, and you will basically never have downtime on that perk anyway. The next weapon on the list is going to be the Scatter Signal. This is what I believe to be the current best fusion rifle in the game, at least for damage. There's only one fusion rifle that's able to do more damage than it, but it requires it to have both surrounded and a second damage perk in the form of a recharge rate increasing perk. So I don't think that's really a fair comparison, because the Scatter Signal does it without any conditions other than just shooting the gun. It has access to Overflow as well as Controlled Burst, and I really like Overflow a lot more than Envious Assassin. I think it's much easier to proc, it takes a lot less effort, and it's less punishing if you screw up with it because you can always just pick up another ammo brick to reset it back to full. That said, it's important to remember that fusion rifles are not the best DPS in the game, and shotguns or snipers will do it better. However, they are certainly easy, and they are also very good weapons when it comes to shooting inanimate objects that don't require crits, stuff like the Oversouls or the cores on DSC. So that was the meat of things. Now we're going to talk about exotics, mainly the ones from the kiosks. There are a couple of pretty good exotics available from Shadowkeep mainly. That being said, I don't think these are the most meta-defining exotics in the game. I think most of those actually come from Red War and Forsaken. However, we do have stuff like Witherhoard and Fourth Horseman, which are definitely very good options. However, they're a little bit specific and hard to use, and they're definitely not for everybody. That said, if you do want to be a more advanced player, I highly recommend picking up both of these as they are very good at their jobs. Fourth Horseman has some of the best burst damage in the game, and it doesn't even take up your heavy slot. And Witherhoard is very good for just adding constant easy damage on top of any other set of weapon movements for damage. Another choice is Bastion. Bastion is basically a pretty niche weapon, but it's definitely the best in slot for what it does, and that is shooting inanimate objects. Bastion absolutely rips through stuff like the Pockets of Poison on Golgroth, or the cores in Deepstone Crypt, and while I haven't tried it, I imagine it would also absolutely rip through the Oversoul as well. However, that's already so weak that a regular fusion can do it on its own and not take the exotic slot. That said, Bastion is very good at just ripping apart any sort of non-precision inanimate object in the game. So if you want to be ready for anything, make sure you pick up Bastion as well. Remember, these will all take exotic ciphers, so you should sort of weigh out what I'm telling you the advantages of each of these weapons are and decide what is the best one for you. Or, I believe you do have time to get an exotic cipher each week from Sir and just get all of them. And last on our list is Leviathan's Breath. It's another kind of just generally easy damage exotic. However, there's some situations when people would call it optimal, and it also has the utility of doing a ton of stagger or flinch, which could be helpful in some situations, so I would definitely pick it up. Make sure you have the Catalyst if you're going to be using it for damage though, and once you have the weapon, you'll get a quest from Banshee to actually do that. Doing the Catalyst does kind of suck, but it's definitely worth it. There are also 2 exotics available as quests after beating stories, so you'll want to beat the Beyond Light and the Witch Queen campaigns. After these, you'll unlock access to quests that unlock you Lament and Parasite. These are 2 very strong weapons for some specific situations, so I highly recommend getting them as a big priority. They're super easy to get, they're just a little grindy, but they're not bad. There's guides out on how to do them quickly and where the best places to go are, but look into them. Parasite and Lament, really great exotics, which are again unlocked after their respective campaigns. And lastly, we're going to talk about the raid weapons. Sadly, most raid weapons aren't really that good when it comes to the meta of the game right now. However, there's still a couple that really stand out, and we're going to go over those. So kicking things off, we're going to look at Valve the Disciple, which is from the Witch Queen. We're pretty much only going to be picking Forbearance out of this. Cataclysmic kind of fell off. Forbearance is an obviously great choice. However, you can now get a version from the Brave Arsenal, which is pretty much just as good. So you could probably put this right on the back burner, really. The really good stuff is actually from the Deepstone Crypt. The Heritage is currently pretty much unreplaceable. The Mountaintop does a decent job at the major clear, especially if you have Overflow and Recombination on it. However, the Heritage is still very good at major clear, and it does okay damage as a DPS weapon as well. As the Slug, it's very niche, however the perks are absolutely so strong and insane that it's still worth it. Basically, you want either Reconstruction or Auto-Loading Holster mixed with Recombination on this weapon. The real standout unreplaceable weapon is the Bequest. This is the sword from Deepstone Crypt, and this sword is blessed in a way because it actually has a higher impact stat than any other sword in the game. This is unexplained, but it is just kind of a thing, and it has good perks, so it's basically just the best legendary sword in the game, and there's just no contest because it just does a higher number than any other sword for whatever reason. This has been the case for a very long time, and it totally could change, but I don't really see why it would. It just kind of is the best sword in the game now, and it has access to Relentless Strikes and Surrounded. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video. If you did learn something from this, or you want to let me know your thoughts on some weapons that people should be going for during this time, leave a comment below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.